Lila walked slowly along the narrow dirt path that ran behind her family's small farm. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of damp earth and morning grass. But even the fresh scent did little to ease the heaviness she felt pressing on her chest. Every step felt like a struggle, as if the weight of her own thoughts made her legs heavy. She had grown up in this quiet rural town, surrounded by fields, woods, and the soft murmur of the river. But even the familiar sights and sounds failed to chase away the shadows that clung to her heart. Since she was a teenager, Lila had carried memories that seemed to shape her every move. Moments of disappointment, of being let down by people she trusted, had made her wary. She had learned early that opening up could be dangerous, that vulnerability often led to pain. Over time, she had built invisible walls around herself, hiding her true feelings even from those who cared most. She laughed with friends and helped her family without complaint, but inside, a quiet storm raged. Some nights, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the choices she had made and the people she had lost along the way. The farm was small, but it required constant work. Mornings were filled with chores, feeding the chickens, tending to the vegetable garden, and checking the fences that kept the animals from wandering off. Lila's father often watched her with pride, though he rarely expressed it in words. Her mother, kind and patient, understood that Lila carried burdens that weren't hers alone, but even she could only offer so much comfort. Lila herself often wondered if she was simply destined to live under a cloud of her own making, walking through life carefully, never fully letting anyone in. That morning, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Lila found herself drawn toward the woods that bordered the farm. It was a place she had always loved, quiet, peaceful, and full of gentle shadows that seemed to understand her. She wandered along the narrow trails, letting her thoughts drift as the birds called softly above her and the river gurgled nearby. She liked the feeling of being alone with her mind, even if the thoughts were heavy. There was something comforting about the trees, about the way their branches stretched upward, like hands reaching for the sky, strong yet silent. As she walked deeper into the woods, she noticed movement in the distance. A figure appeared on the path ahead, a man on horseback. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in simple but sturdy clothes that suited the work of the land. His hat shaded his face, but Lila could see a calmness in his posture, a steady confidence that seemed natural rather than forced. The horse moved with ease, its hooves softly thudding against the earth, and the man guided it with gentle but certain hands. Lila stopped in her tracks, unsure why her heart seemed to flutter at the sight of a stranger. The man noticed her almost immediately, though he did not approach too quickly. There was a kind of patience in the way he observed her, a respect for her space that made Lila feel both curious and cautious. He nodded politely, a small gesture, but it carried warmth. For a moment, Lila felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, as if the presence of another human being, someone who seemed safe, was a balm to her tired spirit. She realized with a start that she had been holding her breath. "Good morning," he said finally, his voice steady and quiet. Lila blinked, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to be polite, to say something, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. She nodded instead, offering a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. He seemed to understand, and he did not press further. Instead, he guided his horse along the path slowly, keeping just enough distance to make her feel safe. She watched him disappear along the trail, feeling an unexpected tug at her heart. Who was he? And why did she feel a strange sense of calm just from seeing him? Lila shook her head, as if to clear the thoughts. She had no idea, but part of her wished she could see him again. Wished she could speak to someone who carried such quiet strength. Over the next few days, Lila found herself wandering near the same woods at times, almost hoping for another glimpse of the stranger on horseback. Life at the farm went on as usual, but her mind was more restless than ever. She tended to the animals and worked in the garden, yet she could not shake the feeling that something was waiting for her just beyond the edge of the trees. The evenings were long and quiet, and she often walked to the riverbank, letting the water flow over the stones as she tried to sort through her tangled thoughts. She realized that the walls she had built around herself were not just protecting her. They were also keeping her from feeling hope, joy, and connection. Then, one late afternoon, she saw him again. The man on horseback had returned to the same path. This time, he stopped near the edge of the woods, his horse grazing calmly beside him. He seemed to be waiting, though not in an imposing way, rather, as if he had learned the patience of the land itself. Leela's heart raced, but she felt a strange sense of trust building inside her. Slowly, she approached, unsure of what she might say or do. "Hello again," he said, this time with a faint smile that seemed to warm the chilly air. "I'm Cole." "Lila," she replied softly. Her voice was quieter than she expected, but he didn't comment on it. Instead, he offered a nod, simple and respectful. There was something in the way he carried himself, something steady and gentle, that made Lila feel like maybe it was okay to let someone see a small piece of her heart. They began to talk, first in short, careful sentences. Lila found that she could speak more easily with him than with most people she knew. There was no judgment in his eyes, no impatience in his tone. He listened as if her words were precious, and in turn, he shared small stories about his life, the work he did on neighboring farms, the quiet moments he cherished, and the journey that had brought him to this town. Lila discovered that he had faced his own struggles, though he spoke of them without bitterness. There was resilience in his words, a sense of understanding that mirrored her own silent battles. For the first time in years, Lila felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. It was fragile, like the first hint of sunlight through a morning fog, but it was there. She realized that meeting someone like Cole did not erase the shadows of her past, but it made her feel less alone in them. Perhaps, she thought, healing did not require perfection. Perhaps it only required a willingness to trust, even just a little. Days turned into weeks, and Lila found herself seeking out those quiet walks more often, drawn to the woods not just for solitude, but for the possibility of meeting Cole again. Their conversations grew longer, more personal, yet always gentle. He never rushed her, never asked her to reveal more than she was ready to share. And slowly, very slowly, the walls she had built around her heart began to feel less like prison bars and more like a temporary shield she could set aside when the time was right. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, Lila paused by the riverbank and thought about how far she had come in such a short time. The loneliness that had felt so permanent now seemed a little less heavy. She realized that even if her past could not be changed, there was still room in her life for trust, for friendship, and perhaps even for love. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, she did not feel trapped by the shadows inside her heart. She felt, instead, a quiet readiness to step forward. And in that moment, she understood something important. Sometimes, saving yourself begins with allowing someone else to stand quietly beside you, offering only presence, patience, and understanding. After that first few encounters in the woods, Lila found herself thinking about Cole more than she expected. It wasn't just the way he moved with quiet confidence, or the way he seemed to understand without judgment. It was something deeper. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of curiosity, a desire to connect rather than retreat. The farm work continued, as usual, but her thoughts were often drawn to the possibility of meeting him again. She told herself she wasn't ready to fully trust anyone yet, but the idea that someone could see her without fear or disdain sparked a small warmth inside her chest. One morning, as she carried a basket of freshly harvested vegetables toward the barn, she noticed a figure moving along the path that led to the woods. Her heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively hesitated. It was him, Cole. He rode calmly, the sunlight glinting off his hat, the horse's mane catching the wind. He stopped a short distance away and tipped his hat politely. "Morning, Lila," he said, his voice gentle, steady, like a soft breeze. "Morning," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither spoke. There was a quiet understanding between them that didn't need words. Cole seemed content to let the silence stretch, allowing Lila to feel safe in the pause. It was rare for her to encounter someone who could sit with her without forcing conversation, without asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Do you want some help with the fence?" he asked eventually, nodding toward the wooden posts that leaned unevenly under the weight of time. Lila hesitated, unsure if she wanted assistance. But something about the calm certainty in his tone made her nod. "That would be nice," she admitted softly. They spent the morning repairing the fence together. Lila handed him tools, measured beams, and occasionally laughed at small mistakes, feeling an ease she hadn't felt in years. Cole spoke sparingly. But when he did, it was thoughtful, often including small tips or stories about his own experiences with farm work. She found herself listening intently, not just to the words, but to the patience behind them. It was a new sensation, being around someone who didn't expect perfection from her, who seemed to value the effort itself rather than the result. As the sun climbed higher, they paused to drink water from a small canteen. Cole leaned against the post, wiping sweat from his brow, and for a moment, Lila watched him without speaking. He had a quiet strength about him that was different from the loud, assertive confidence of some men she had met before. This strength was steady, unshakable, yet gentle, a kind of strength that could carry another person without crushing them. She realized, with a mixture of surprise and hope, that she wanted to know more about him. Over the next few days, their paths continued to cross. Sometimes it was by coincidence, a shared walk through the woods, a meeting near the riverbank. But gradually, these encounters became a routine neither of them had planned. Cole never forced conversation, never asked about the parts of her life she wasn't ready to share. Yet, in the gentle way he listened. In the quiet way, he simply was there. He offered her something she hadn't realized she craved: companionship, without expectation. One evening, the town held a small fair on the main street. Lila's mother insisted she attend, saying it would be good for her to see other people. Lila agreed reluctantly, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. She wandered between stalls, watching children play and neighbors exchange greetings, feeling both connected and strangely distant from the lively scene. She didn't expect to see Cole there. Yet as she rounded a corner near the game booths, there he was. "Lila," he called softly, waving her over. She approached, unsure of how she felt about seeing him in the midst of a crowd, but he smiled in a way that put her at ease. They walked together along the edge of the fair, talking quietly, sharing small observations about the lights, the food, and the music. Lila felt a rare joy bubbling inside her chest, a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It was fleeting but real, and it reminded her that life could offer moments of happiness even amidst the lingering shadows of the past. But that night also brought a reminder of her own fragility. A loud noise from a nearby stall startled her, and suddenly, memories she had long tried to bury surged to the surface. Her chest tightened, her hands shook, and panic clawed at her throat. She tried to push through, to laugh it off, but the fear was stronger than her will. Without thinking, she bolted from the crowd, running toward the quiet woods beyond the town. Her heart raced, her legs trembling, as the familiar trees rose before her like silent guardians. Cole noticed immediately. He didn't chase her, but he followed at a careful distance, watching as she disappeared among the shadows of the trees. He knew not to force words or presence upon her in these moments. Instead, he allowed her space to feel, to confront the storm within herself. After a short while, he reached her side, his calm presence grounding her, even before he spoke. Lila sank to the ground near the riverbank, shaking, tears streaming silently down her face. I can't," she whispered, voice breaking, though she didn't finish the sentence. Cole knelt beside her, speaking softly, a steady anchor in the turbulent water of her emotions. "It's okay," he said. "I'm right here. You don't have to face this alone." For the first time in a long while, Lila allowed herself to lean against someone else. She trembled, not just from fear, but from relief. From the release of carrying her burdens alone for so long. Cole didn't ask questions. He didn't demand answers. He simply held space for her. And in that quiet, gentle way, he offered her the first real taste of safety she had felt in years. In the following weeks, Lila's trust in him began to grow. She learned that opening up didn't have to mean exposing every fear or every memory all at once. She could share fragments of herself, pieces of the heart she had kept hidden, and still be met with understanding, rather than judgment. Cole's presence was a quiet encouragement, a reminder that healing didn't have to be rushed. It could happen slowly, step by careful step. Even so, Lila knew her journey was far from over. Some days, the shadows of doubt and fear returned, whispering that she wasn't worthy of care or happiness. But the difference now was that she had someone to remind her otherwise, not by force, not by pressure, but by simply being there. His quiet patience became a beacon, guiding her through moments when she felt lost or afraid. One afternoon, while helping Cole mend a broken wheel on his wagon, Lila realized just how much she had come to rely on his presence. She laughed at a small mistake she made, and Cole's easy smile made her feel lighter than she had in years. There was no rush, no expectation, just the shared rhythm of two people working together, speaking when necessary, laughing when it felt right, and sitting in silence when words weren't enough. The sun dipped low in the sky as they finished their work, painting the fields in shades of amber and gold. Lila felt a quiet pride, not just in completing the task, but in noticing how much courage it had taken for her to reach this point. She had faced her own fears, allowed herself to be seen in small ways, and found that someone cared enough to stand by her without judgment. The warmth of that realization filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't dared to imagine. That night, Lila lay in bed, thinking about the day. Her heart was no longer as heavy as it had been in the past. There was a lightness, fragile but persistent, that came from knowing she was not alone. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't need to. For now, it was enough to trust that healing was possible, that moments of joy could exist alongside lingering fears, and that connection, real, patient, and understanding connection, was a gift worth cherishing. In the quiet hours before sleep, Lila whispered to herself, almost as if testing the words, maybe I can be okay. And in the darkness, she felt, for the first time in a long while, that maybe she could be more than okay. Maybe she could begin to heal, step by careful step, with someone beside her who truly understood. As the days turned into weeks, Lila discovered that even small moments with Cole carried unexpected weight. She noticed how his presence seemed to settle the restless shadows in her heart. When he laughed, it was soft and genuine, never forced. And somehow it reminded her of simpler, happier times she thought she had lost forever. Yet, despite the comfort he offered, Lila still struggled. The past had a way of creeping into her mind at the most inconvenient moments, casting doubt over her every action. She would suddenly question her own worth, wonder if she was too damaged to ever be truly happy, and sometimes, without meaning to, push Cole away before he could get too close. One early morning, Lila set out to check the barn, her mind heavy with thoughts she couldn't shake. She felt the familiar ache in her chest, a mix of fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. She worked quietly, feeding the animals, brushing the horse, and stacking hay. Yet she couldn't ignore the constant voice inside her that whispered, "Don't trust him. Don't let him in. You'll only get hurt again." Lila clenched her fists and tried to focus, but the shadows in her heart were persistent. Cole arrived later, as he often did, offering his help in the most natural way possible. He didn't demand attention or explanations. He simply began assisting with the chores, moving alongside her with steady hands and careful movements. For a while, they worked in silence, the sound of rustling hay and soft animal noises filling the air. Lila felt comforted by his presence, yet the fear still lingered, tugging at the edges of her mind. "Hey," Cole said gently after a while, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "You've been quiet today. Are you okay?" Lila looked away, unsure how to respond. Words were difficult. Speaking too much felt dangerous. "I'm fine," she said softly, though even she wasn't convinced. She wanted to tell him about the storm inside her, the doubts and fears that never seemed to leave, but the words lodged in her throat. Cole nodded, accepting her answer without judgment. That small act of understanding gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt before. Despite the calm exterior, Lila's internal struggle continued. Some nights, she would lie awake, thinking about the mistakes she had made and the people who had left her behind. She wondered if she was capable of love, capable of letting someone in without being consumed by fear. Yet, every time she saw Cole, every time he offered a quiet smile or a reassuring presence, she felt the smallest flicker of hope. She realized that healing might not mean forgetting the past, it might simply mean learning to live alongside it. One day, as Lila was walking through the woods, she tripped over a tree root and fell, scraping her knee. Pain shot through her leg, and she instinctively called out, hoping someone would hear. Moments later, Cole appeared, riding his horse at a careful pace. He dismounted quickly, kneeling beside her, with a practiced ease. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, examining the wound. I think it's fine," she replied, trying to hide the pain, as she had always done in the past. But Cole noticed the tremor in her hands, the way she flinched, and he gently took her hand in his. "It's okay," he said. "Let me help you." He cleaned and bandaged the scrape with patient, careful movements, never rushing, never making her feel weak for needing help. Lila felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, trust, and something else she couldn't yet name. In that moment, she realized that Cole's presence was more than comfort. It was a shield against the shadows that had haunted her for years. Despite these small victories, Lila's fears were not easily silenced. She sometimes found herself withdrawing suddenly, avoiding Cole's gaze, or inventing excuses to be alone. She worried that if she allowed herself to be vulnerable, she would inevitably be hurt again. But Cole never seemed offended or frustrated. He remained patient, always returning with a quiet understanding that encouraged her to open up in her own time. His patience was not passive. It was active care, a deliberate choice to stay present, even when she tried to push him away. One evening, as the sky turned shades of purple and gold, Lila and Cole worked together to gather firewood. The air was cool, and the soft rustling of leaves created a peaceful rhythm around them. Lila spoke softly about her childhood memories, the times she had spent playing near the river, the days she had felt carefree despite hardships at home. Cole listened attentively, occasionally sharing his own stories, never forcing her to speak beyond her comfort zone. Lila realized that trust could be built slowly, that vulnerability didn't have to be terrifying if met with patience and kindness. Yet, even as she began to trust, Lila knew the shadowed heart inside her wasn't gone. One day, while cleaning the barn, she remembered a moment from the past that had caused her immense pain. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she felt a sudden urge to run, to escape the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Before she could react, Cole appeared at the barn door, having noticed the change in her expression from afar. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations. Instead, he stepped closer, offering a silent hand of support. "You don't have to face it alone," he said softly. Those words, simple as they were, felt like a lifeline. Lila allowed herself to lean against him, trembling, crying quietly. And in that moment, she understood that strength wasn't about never feeling fear or sadness. It was about finding someone who could hold your hand while you faced it. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. Cole's presence was a constant, a gentle reminder that Lila could feel and still be safe. She began to share more of herself, revealing small pieces of her shadowed heart without fear of judgment. She spoke of dreams she had long buried, of fears she hadn't shared with anyone, and of moments when she had felt completely alone. Cole never rushed her, never made her feel small for her struggles. His patience and quiet encouragement helped her see that the past didn't have to define her present, that her heart could slowly learn to trust again. One afternoon, while helping him repair a fence on a neighboring property, Lila laughed at a mistake she made with a post. Cole chuckled too, not in a mocking way, but in a way that made her feel lighter. For the first time in years, she felt that she could be herself without fear. She realized that being around him didn't mean she was abandoning caution. It meant she was learning that some people were worth taking a chance on. That thought brought a small, genuine smile to her face, a rare expression that reflected hope rather than fear. Yet, even with progress, Lila's journey was not without struggle. Some days, memories of past heartbreak and disappointment would resurface unexpectedly, reminding her that healing was not a straight path. She occasionally retreated, unsure if she was ready to face Cole or anyone else fully. But each time, Cole returned, patient and unwavering, reminding her in subtle ways that she was not alone. He didn't force her to speak or act. He simply provided a constant presence, a safe space in which her heart could slowly mend. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat by the riverbank, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The quiet sounds of flowing water and rustling leaves created a peaceful rhythm. Lila turned to Cole and said softly, "I don't know if I've ever trusted someone like this before." Cole smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "It's okay," he replied. "You don't have to know everything at once. Trust isn't about speed. It's about letting someone walk with you through the parts that scare you." Lila nodded, feeling a small surge of courage. She realized that even if her heart was still fragile, it was capable of healing. The shadows were still there, but they were no longer as controlling as they had been. With Cole by her side, she could face the uncertainty, the fear, and the memories without being consumed by them. As the night settled over the farm, Lila lay in bed, thinking about the days that had passed. She understood that healing was not instant, and that she would have moments of doubt, fear, and sadness. But she also understood something more important. She didn't have to face those moments alone. Cole had shown her that companionship, patience, and understanding could illuminate even the darkest corners of the heart. And in the quiet of her room, Lila whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I can face the shadows, step by step, with someone beside me." For the first time, the words didn't feel like a wish, they felt like a beginning. The days had grown shorter, and the evenings cooler, as autumn approached. Lila felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness in her chest, a combination she had not known for years. The world seemed to hum with change, the trees slowly shedding their leaves, the wind carrying a sharpness that made her pull her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Though the shadows of her heart were still present, she had learned to live alongside them, especially with Cole nearby. His presence had become a quiet anchor, steadying her through moments of fear and self-doubt. Yet, even with that support, Lila knew that life could still be unpredictable, and fear sometimes had a way of finding her when she least expected it. One afternoon, while helping with chores in the backfields, She noticed the sky darkening quickly, clouds gathering faster than she had anticipated. The wind picked up, rustling the tall grasses and bending the trees. Cole had gone ahead to check the fences on the neighboring property, and she found herself alone, the shadows of the woods seeming larger, more intimidating than usual. A sense of unease grew in her chest. And though she tried to brush it off as the natural tension of an approaching storm, the feeling persisted. By the time she reached the riverbank to check the water level, rain had begun to fall in sharp, cold drops. The wind howled through the trees, carrying a chill that made her shiver despite her thick sweater. Lila realized she needed to head back to the farmhouse, but the storm was coming faster than she could manage. The narrow path through the woods was slippery, and each step required careful attention. Panic crept into her mind, a shadow threatening to take over as fear clouded her thoughts. What if I slip? What if I can't make it home? The questions echoed relentlessly. Lila! Cole's voice rang out, strong and calm over the wind and rain. Relief and fear collided in her chest as she turned toward the sound, seeing him riding his horse toward her through the sheets of rain. He moved steadily, unshaken by the storm, as if he belonged in the chaos rather than being frightened by it. Lila's legs trembled, both from cold and anxiety, and she whispered to herself, almost under her breath, "Please, don't let me go." Cole reached her quickly, dismounting with skill and landing softly beside her. Without rushing her, he offered his hand, steady and reassuring. Lila grasped it tightly, feeling the warmth and security radiate from him. "I've got you," he said simply, his voice cutting through the noise of the storm. "You're safe with me. Just hold on." Together, they navigated the slippery path back through the woods. Cole's calm guidance made each step manageable. But the storm still raged around them. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the treetops in sharp, jagged flashes. Lila's heart raced, not only from the danger, but from the realization that she was no longer facing it alone. She didn't have to rely solely on herself. She could trust that someone would be there when the darkness threatened to overwhelm her. As they reached a safer clearing near the edge of the woods, Lila's body trembled from a mixture of fear, cold, and adrenaline. She sank to the ground, hugging her knees, and let herself cry quietly. The storm seemed to echo the turbulence inside her past pains, lingering doubts, and the persistent voice of fear that had followed her for years. Cole knelt beside her, not saying a word, but his presence was more comforting than anything he could have said. He simply let her cry, offering a hand for her to hold whenever she needed it, his calmness counteracting the chaos of the storm. "You're not alone," he said gently after a few moments, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "You don't have to face this by yourself." Lila looked at him, tears still streaming, and felt the weight of her fears begin to lift, even if only slightly. The words were simple, but they carried a promise that she could face her inner darkness and still be supported. The shadows of her heart had always seemed insurmountable. But in that moment, with Cole beside her, they seemed less threatening, more manageable. The storm eventually began to ease, rain softening into a steady drizzle. The wind lost its sharp edge, and the clouds slowly parted to reveal slivers of a gray sky. Cole helped Lila to her feet, steadying her as they made their way to the farmhouse. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the storm had washed away not just the rain, but some of the fear that had clung to her for so long. By the time they reached the warmth of the kitchen, soaked but safe, Lila felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She realized that the storm outside had mirrored the storm inside her, and surviving it had given her a new kind of courage. That evening, as she dried her hair and changed into dry clothes, Lila reflected on what had happened. She understood that her shadowed heart was not something that could be erased overnight. It had taken years to form, and it would take time to heal. But she also recognized a truth she had long resisted. That vulnerability did not equal weakness. In fact, allowing herself to feel fear and having someone there to support her through it had made her stronger. Cole remained nearby, chatting quietly with her parents about minor farm matters, but always keeping an eye on her. Lila noticed how naturally he blended into her life, not as someone who demanded attention, but as someone whose presence offered stability. She realized that love, patience, and understanding were not just abstract ideas, they could be lived, felt, and shared, even in the simplest moments of daily life. Over the following days, Lila began to notice subtle changes in herself. She smiled more freely, laughed without hesitation, and even began to speak more openly with Cole. The memories of the storm lingered, not as trauma, but as a reminder that she had survived, that she could face fear and emerge stronger with someone by her side. She began to share more of her thoughts, her dreams, and even her worries, knowing that Cole would listen without judgment. One quiet afternoon, while sitting together near the riverbank, Lila whispered, almost to herself, "I never knew I could feel safe like this." Cole looked at her with a soft smile. "Safety isn't about the world around you," he said. "It's about knowing someone will stand with you, no matter what." Lila realized that he was right. For the first time, she understood that love was not about perfection, nor was it about erasing fear. Love was about presence, patience, and support. About allowing someone to be themselves while offering a steady hand when life became overwhelming. She felt a warmth in her heart she had not known in years, a quiet light beginning to shine through the shadows. Yet, even in these peaceful moments, Lila knew the journey was ongoing. There would be other storms, both literal and metaphorical. There would be moments of doubt, fear, and pain. But now, she carried a new sense of courage, the knowledge that she did not have to face these challenges alone. Cole's presence had shown her that the shadows of her heart could be faced, step by step, and that healing was possible with patience and understanding. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with soft shades of orange and purple, Lila found herself holding Cole's hand. She felt a gentle squeeze in return, a quiet affirmation that he would remain by her side. She whispered softly, almost as if confessing to herself, "Thank you for not letting me go." The words were more than gratitude. They were recognition of the journey she had undertaken, the courage she had discovered within herself, and the trust she had learned to place in another person. That night, as she lay in bed, Lila reflected on the events of the storm and the days that followed. The storm had been frightening, chaotic, and unpredictable, much like the struggles she had faced in her own heart. But surviving it had given her clarity, courage, and hope. She realized that the darkness she had carried for so long was not a permanent prison. With patience, love, and a steady presence, she could navigate the shadows and emerge stronger. As sleep approached, Lila closed her eyes and felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. She understood that trust and love were not instantaneous, they were built slowly, through moments of vulnerability and quiet support. She had allowed herself to be seen, to lean on someone else, and in return, she had discovered the strength to face her fears. The storm had passed, but the lessons it left behind would remain with her forever. The first days of winter approached, and with them came a crispness in the air that made the world seem sharper, clearer, and somehow more alive. Lila woke each morning, feeling a quiet sense of peace she had not known for years. The shadows in her heart still lingered, as they always would, but they no longer ruled her thoughts. She had discovered a strength within herself, nurtured by patience, trust, and the presence of someone who cared deeply for her. Cole had become more than just a companion. He was a steady presence, a guide through the uncertainty, and a partner in the gentle rhythm of daily life. Life on the farm continued with its usual routines. Lila rose early to feed the animals, tend the gardens, and make sure everything ran smoothly. Yet, now there was a lightness to her steps, a sense of possibility she had not allowed herself to feel before. She smiled more freely at her parents, laughed more easily with friends, and even found herself humming softly as she worked, a small song of hope rising in her chest. Cole often joined her, either on horseback or walking beside her, sharing moments of quiet companionship without the need for words. One afternoon, Lila stood at the edge of the woods, watching the sun reflect off the frozen patches along the river. The wind carried a sharp bite, but the sky was clear, a pale blue stretching far above. Cole rode up beside her, guiding his horse to a stop. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, nodding toward the glimmering landscape. Lila smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the steadiness of his presence at her side. "Yes," she said softly. "It feels calm, different than it used to." Cole nodded, understanding more than she could express. "Calm doesn't mean nothing ever goes wrong," he said. "It just means you can handle the challenges without feeling like they control you." Lila thought about that, reflecting on the storms she had faced, both the literal one that had tested her courage and the emotional ones that had haunted her for years. She realized he was right. She had faced fear, sadness, and doubt. And yet she was still standing, stronger and more certain of herself than she had been in a long time. The shadows of her past were still there, but they no longer held power over her. The days that followed were filled with small joys. Lila and Cole spent mornings repairing fences, afternoons gathering firewood, and evenings sharing stories by the fireplace. Sometimes they walked along the frozen river, watching ducks glide across the icy water or listening to the soft rustle of trees in the winter wind. Lila felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. She had learned that happiness was not the absence of struggle, but the ability to embrace moments of warmth and connection despite it. One evening, as snow began to fall lightly, Lila and Cole returned from the fields, their boots crunching softly on the frosty ground. The farmhouse glowed with the warm light of the hearth, and Lila felt a comforting sense of home settle over her. Cole carried a small bundle of firewood inside, and Lila helped him stack it neatly near the fireplace. They moved together in easy, familiar rhythm, a quiet partnership that spoke more than words could. After the chores were finished, they sat by the fire, sipping warm tea and watching the flames dance. Lila felt a quiet contentment in the simple act of being together. She realized how far she had come from the fearful, lonely girl who had wandered the woods months ago, unsure of trust or hope. Now, she could sit beside someone who cared for her deeply, share laughter and stories, and feel safe in a way she had never allowed herself before. As the night grew darker and the fire crackled softly, Lila turned to Cole and said, "I never thought I could feel this. At peace. I never believed it was possible." Cole reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly. "It is possible," he said. "You just had to learn that it's okay to let someone stand with you, even when things feel uncertain. You've done the hard part, trusting, opening your heart, and facing your fears. Now, it's time to embrace the happiness you deserve." Lila felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this one was not born of sadness. It was a tear of relief, gratitude, and joy. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined by shadows or fear. She could picture mornings filled with laughter, evenings by the fire with warmth and companionship, and days that held the possibility of love, hope, and connection. Winter settled fully over the town, blanketing the fields and woods in soft white snow. Lila and Cole continued their daily routines, but now with a sense of harmony and balance. They worked together, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through minor setbacks. Lila's heart, once shadowed and hesitant, had learned to trust, to hope, and to embrace moments of joy without fear of loss. She understood that love was not about perfection or grand gestures. It was about presence, patience, and the willingness to walk through life's uncertainties together. One quiet afternoon, Cole suggested they take a walk to a small hill overlooking the river. where the sunset often painted the sky in brilliant colors. Lila agreed, bundling herself in a thick coat and scarf. The path was slippery with frost, but together they moved carefully, supporting each other with light touches and gentle laughter when one slipped slightly. When they reached the top, they stood in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting shades of pink and gold across the snowy landscape. "It's beautiful," Lila whispered, leaning slightly into Cole's side. "Yes," he agreed softly, "just like this moment. And just like life, you have to take it step by step, sometimes slowly, sometimes carefully, but it's worth it." Lila smiled, feeling the warmth of his hand on hers. She realized that she had not only survived the storms and shadows in her heart, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the possibilities ahead. Trust had become a choice she could make without fear, and love had become a language she understood. That night, back at the farmhouse, Lila reflected on everything that had happened over the past months. She thought about the first time she had wandered into the woods, heavy with sadness and uncertainty. She remembered the fear that had made her tremble, the shadows that had made her feel isolated and unworthy. And she remembered Cole, the quiet, steady presence that had offered patience, understanding, and hope without asking for anything in return. She understood now that the journey of healing was not about erasing the past, but about learning to live alongside it. Her shadowed heart had been transformed, not erased, and she could carry the lessons of fear, doubt, and resilience into the future. Cole had shown her that love and trust were possible, that vulnerability was not weakness, and that someone could stand with her through life's uncertainties without judgment. Days turned into weeks, and Lila found herself embracing life with a renewed sense of joy. She laughed freely, worked diligently, and allowed herself to dream again. She and Cole became inseparable companions, sharing not only work and daily routines, but quiet moments of reflection, gentle conversation, and shared wonder at the beauty around them. Lila felt a sense of wholeness she had never known before, a connection that went beyond words and gestures, a connection of hearts and understanding. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside and the farmhouse glowed with warmth, Lila whispered to Cole, "Thank you for not letting me go." "Goon." Cole smiled, a gentle light in his eyes. "I'll never let you go," he said softly. "We'll face life together, whatever comes." In that moment, Lila felt the culmination of her journey, the triumph over fear, the embrace of trust, and the quiet acceptance of love. The shadows in her heart had not disappeared entirely, but they had been softened, held at bay by courage, patience, and companionship. She realized that life was a series of moments, some bright and joyful, some dark and challenging, but each made meaningful by the people we allow to walk with us. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the wind softly rustle the trees outside, Lila felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that challenges would come, that fear might return in unexpected ways, but she also knew she would never face them alone. She had found strength in vulnerability, hope in trust, and love in presence. And for the first time in her life, Lila felt fully alive, fully seen, and fully ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. Hand in hand with someone who had saved her, not just from the shadows around her, but from the shadows within herself.